Hello and welcome to this edition of EC3 HOSA Medical Moments. I'm Gina Ryan, Director of Hardin County Educational and Community Television, and joining me today is a very familiar face in our area. It's Melissa Phillips, and she works with the Lincoln Trail District Health Department. And you have dual roles of public information, but also educator. So one of the topics that is really important to us in our community is vaping. And that vaping is getting into younger and younger hands. And therefore that is extremely dangerous for our students. And we need to know how to combat this issue. So I asked Melissa to come in to first talk about why this explosion has happened. I think initially 3 or 4 years ago we were talking about older teenagers possibly using, but now it's in our middle school ranks as well. So first of all, what do parents need to know about vaping, what it is and why it is dangerous?
So the first thing I would say is please don't think vaping is a safer alternative to traditional cigarettes. I think a lot of families have that mindset, well, at least they're not smoking. And we don't know everything yet. This is still a relatively new product, but we know enough to know there are a lot of harms with vaping. And a lot of times kids don't know what is in those cartridges that they're vaping, and that's scary.
Yeah. And of course, those things that are in those cartridges, that's really the thing that kind of drives them to that. Is that correct? Does they give a different hit, a different feel when they inhale it?
And a lot of times they think it's nicotine, but a lot of kids don't think nicotine is addictive. So you have that issue. A lot of times they think it's nicotine, but it's actually THC. And so that's going to have a totally different effect. And sometimes they're actually seeking to vape THC. So you kind of have a spectrum of issues there.
And we are saying they in regards to the manufacturers, correct? And the people that are getting it in the hands of students?
Correct. Sometimes it's the kids who don't know what they have. They think they're buying one thing and it's something else, or they're getting it from a friend or a family member. It's so accessible right now. And sometimes it's the seller. Because there is no oversight of this industry, you don't know what is in that product. So the seller may not even be aware of what they actually have.
How is this being marketed in terms of, I've heard that they have flavors that are specific to teens wanting to try it. Bubblegum and chocolate and all that. That's a way in, is that correct?
And that's the first piece. We kind of have what we call an equation for kids, and advertising is that first piece. The industry will say this product is not for children because it cannot be sold legally under the age of 21. But if you look at what they market and how they market and the products themselves, they are so marketed to young people. So that advertising is a big part of it, and they've made the switch from traditional advertising to social media because they know that's where the kids are
looking at it. Is the cost prohibitive to the kids? How much is it?
It's not, especially when they can get it from their peers, they can get it from family members. So initially it was upper class kids because they could afford the product, but now it's all kids. So you can't say a certain type of kid is going to be using the vapes because there is no certain type of kid.
When students, school-age children, walk into convenience stores and buy those items off the shelf, as a consumer, can I report that in any way if I see it firsthand?
That can be reported to the FDA. However, kids know, and like I said, there is an age limit. It is 21 in Kentucky, but kids know the places that will sell to minors. there's one in every community, at least one in every community. And by word of mouth, they're going to know where to go. So there is a reporting process for that. And we kind of talked about this beforehand. Unfortunately, the penalty side of it is not as stringent as it could be to kind of deter some of the selling to minors.
It's a little bit like a fine of $150 to a company is not going to offset $10,000 sales
And
in a couple of weeks.
they go after the clerk that sold it first, so it doesn't hit the business owner
At all.
At all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's getting into younger and younger hands?
I think for some, there's a family norm. You know, if mom and dad vape, my older brother and sister vape, what's the big deal? So there's a culture in that household where it's just not seen as an issue. Or, you know, I'm looking up to that older brother or sister or that athlete that I idolize. So again, there's still, you know, it's been quite a few years this has been, you know, on the scope, but there's still a lot of what's the big deal with vapes. Until recently, locally, we've had a couple of overdoses linked to vapes, and it's again, they didn't know what was in that device.
Did they found out what was in those?
You know, after you test what was in it, you can figure out, you know, the cause. But if I think I'm getting nicotine and it turns out to be high-level THC, you know, there are consequences.
Exactly. A few years ago, when Dr. Godfrey and the health department did a wonderful presentation, and we had taped that presentation, you had mentioned at that presentation that they're making clothing and objects that students can use that currently parents or teachers may not realize, that they're actually vape transferring devices.
And that's why I stand by my statement that they are directly marketing to kids. There is an industry called vapeware, where it's clothing where you can disguise that you're vaping. Number one, if I have to disguise it, that's an issue right there.
Right.
Some of the vapes that are being confiscated in our schools right now look like little plastic cups with a straw. Again, that's not something an adult is going to use, so they are directly marketing to kids. So not only is it something a kid would choose, but it's hiding what's inside. So that is very concerning.
And we have a district policy. No tobacco, no vaping, none of those objects are welcome on our school grounds. So when students are using a device and things, we're on the lookout. We being our administrators, you know, we want to be vigilant about not letting that happen, because like you mentioned before, that one person may spread that use to another person and then to another person. And in our schools, the idea, there are devices I believe that schools are able to use now that can kindly spot check vaping. Are there things in the community that parents can do? I mean, I'm almost hearing that possibly the parents may not have an aversion to it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't necessarily, let me buy your vape for you. But for those parents that are on the opposite end, they have no clue that their child is vaping. Are there some things that parents can look for to see if it's going on in their child?
Kind of some of the behaviors you would look for with any substance. Are they sleeping more than they should? Are they very irritable first thing in the morning, and that's unusual for them? And that could be signs of nicotine withdrawal. Mm-hmm. Is there a fruity or chemical smell you're noticing in their bedroom or in their vehicle if they're drivers? It's not an air freshener typically. It could be a vape. And if you're seeing those kinds of devices, you know, the little plastic cup, or because the vapes change so rapidly, I would really urge parents and educators too, you know, every couple of months refresh yourself on what is popular, because they might be right in front of your face and you not realize that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. With vaping being so prevalent, it seems like it's the lesser of two evils. We discussed a month ago we were talking about fentanyl and the idea that it is also going around in our community. And now that, just the explosion of vape. Has COVID kind of caused that push into those areas with kids being isolated? So therefore this might be a way of them to cope?
I'm glad you asked that question because vaping and substance use in general had declined in our young people, and then COVID hit. And they were isolated from their peers, they were isolated from their families in a large sense, and they started turning to substances to cope. Because if we look back before the pandemic, if you had polled teenagers, why would you try vape? They would say, oh, because of all the flavor options. And now if you poll those same kids, they would say, well, I need it to cope. I'm battling feelings of depression, anxiety, and I think it helps, when the opposite is actually true. We just need to find a way to teach those kids that nicotine is exacerbating those feelings of hopelessness and depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Now, as part of the health department, what are some of the services or educational opportunities that your district provides?
So like you said, one of my hats is our school initiatives program. So we can actually bring trained educators into the schools. We do have one curriculum that's kind of a broad substance abuse curriculum, and then we have a couple that are specifically for tobacco.
What about also church groups?
Yes, probably not my program, but we also have a harm reduction program. So they handle more of the community side of things. So if a business needs education for their staff, or a civic group, a church group wants education, we can connect them in that way.
Is there anything that I haven't covered today that you'd really like to touch on?
I would just like to circle back to that it's not a safer alternative. So please don't think that a vape is less harmful, especially now that we're seeing, and you can ask any of our school resource officers, when they test those vapes at school, probably at least 50% of the time it's not nicotine, it's THC.
Wow.
So I would imagine a lot of times those kids didn't even know that's what they had. So we really need to educate them that, you're rolling the dice. It could be a pleasant hit the first time and you can end up in the hospital the second time. So it's just better not to start in the first place.
I know that our schools are being very vigilant in trying to educate and inform our parents, our community members, our guardians of our students, and we've had some forums, informational sessions, and so we're going to use a few highlights. Of course, none of those are highlights that you want to see, but those hard to hit or the key points that you need to know as a caregiver, as a guardian, as a parent. So our parents, our community, we need to be vigilant and try to sniff it out. So we need to do our due process as well. We need to be active. If we see something, say something.
Correct.
And just even those parents who feel like their child's friend is possibly using, that it's important to maybe have those hard discussions, because maybe you're the person that child looks up to also.
And I will do a plug. We did have a partnership with John Hardin High School, and they have a vape disposal box. So if a kid does have one, they want to get rid of it, they want it out of their house, out of their friend group, they can turn it in, no consequences, no questions asked. And the family resource person there can also connect them to resources if they feel like they're addicted and they want to quit.
We are, being the Hardin County Schools, we are having forums and educational opportunities for our parents, and definitely great way to touch base with parents. Sometimes people cannot get there, so in that hindsight, with us videotaping that presentation, want to make sure that parents take a look at those. I know that we will have a couple of those coming on in the next few days, but you can also check out our HCEC-TV YouTube channel. Melissa, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing that information. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of information, it's not that feel-good information, and so we are at a situation where we need action. People need to help combat this issue, not promote it. Okay, so thank you once again.
Thank you.
If people would like have any information, could they get in touch with the health department?
So you can always check out our tobacco resources on the health department's website, which is ltdhd.org, and we're on all the socials as well.
Okay, great. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for joining us for EC3 HOSA Medical Moments.